In the 2022 Brazilian presidential elections, something surprising happened. While all the polls indicated a victory in the first round, the reality of the ballot boxes led the competition to a contested second round, where there was no favoritism as reported by the Intention to Vote institutes. During election times, electoral polls are common and show the percentage of Brazilians intending to vote for a particular candidate. But is that really the case? You see, Brazil is a country of continental proportions, making it practically impossible for a single poll to cover the entire national territory. In other words, no poll will truly estimate the number of votes a candidate might receive, which is why they tend to be off by various percentage points. But then, why conduct a poll if it won't accurately predict the election outcome? What is the real reason behind their existence? Welcome to our channel, and in today's video, you will discover the untold truth about electoral polls. But before we begin, go ahead and leave a like if you're interested in the topic, and if you're not already subscribed, consider subscribing to our channel. Also, make sure to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates on our channel. And in the comments, let us know if you've ever participated in an electoral poll or if you know someone who has. Without further ado, let's get into the video. The polls. Before we delve into the untold truth about electoral polls, it's essential to first understand how they are conducted, the methods used, and how many people are interviewed regarding their voting intentions before the results are revealed. Electoral polls in Brazil are conducted by research institutes, specialized companies in public opinion surveys. These polls aim to measure the voters' intent for different positions, such as president, governor, senator, federal deputy, and state deputy. The process usually involves several stages. Firstly, a sampling is conducted, which consists of selecting a representative and diverse group of voters, aiming to reflect the population of the state or municipality where the poll will take place. Statistical techniques are used to ensure that the sample is both random and proportional. Data collection is done through interviews, which can be conducted in various ways, such as by phone, in person, or online. During the interviews, voters are questioned following a structured questionnaire with specific questions about their voting preferences and other relevant topics related to the election. After data collection, the information is processed and analyzed statistically. Research institutes tabulate the results to obtain the intent to vote estimates for each candidate. These results are then disseminated through reports, graphs, press interviews, and are often broadcast in the media. The process seems comprehensive and secure and certainly can provide guidance for the direction of a presidential election, for instance, primarily assisting candidates in analyzing their campaign performance. But is that really the case? And who actually conducts these electoral polls? The institutes. You've probably heard the names of some of the institutes responsible for electoral polls, as typically, when the results are published in newspapers or on the internet, the source of the poll is mentioned. In Brazil, there are several research institutes that conduct electoral polls. Some of the most well-known and respected ones include IPEC, formerly IBOP, is one of the most traditional research companies in Brazil. It has been conducting public opinion surveys and electoral polls for decades. Datafolha, owned by Grupo Folha, conducts intention to vote and opinion polls in various areas, including elections. Instituto Parana Pesquisas is also a well-recognized company for conducting national and regional electoral polls. There's also Instituto MDA, which conducts public opinion and electoral polls in partnership with media outlets. Instituto Data Poder 360 is responsible for polls in partnership with the Poder 360 portal and specializes in politics and elections. These are just a few examples of research institutes operating in Brazil. In reality, the list is quite extensive, with over 50 institutes conducting electoral polls in the country. By May 2022, before the first round of the presidential elections, around 30 institutes had already registered more than 55 polls with the Superior Electoral Court. But what's the reason for so many institutes conducting electoral polls in Brazil? Well, the answer is quite simple. The cost for a single electoral poll ranges from 20 to 400,000 Brazilian reais, and during an election period, new polls are conducted almost every week. From this, you can already understand a bit about the reason for the abundance of institutes. After all, it's a lucrative field where all that's needed is to interview people, who usually respond to surveys for free, and then release the results. But who really pays 400,000 reais for a single poll? Who funds them? Initially, the question might seem obvious. After all, who would pay for a poll other than the candidates themselves or the parties interested in an electoral competition? In reality, that does happen, but the vast majority of electoral polls published, especially during the election period, are financed by investment banks or media outlets. In 2022, out of 10 electoral polls evaluated by UNTOLD, 4 were funded by media outlets, which makes sense as the poll turns into a news item and generates greater revenue for news websites, television channels, etc. One was commissioned by the National Confederation of Transport, CNT, and 5 polls were paid for by banks and brokerage firms. That's right, 50% of the polls were funded by financial institutions that paid for electoral polls in 2022, including Banco Genial, BTG Pactual, BGC Liquidez, Banco Modal, and XP Investimentos. But why are investment banks so interested in paying for electoral polls? What's the real motive behind this maneuver? What's the untold truth about electoral polls? The motives. First of all, it's important to clarify that in reality, anyone can commission an electoral poll, with the only requirement being that if it's intended to be disclosed to the public during the election period, it needs to be registered with the Electoral Supreme Court, TSE, beforehand. Beyond this detail, polls can be funded by anyone or any institution, including being financed by the company or institute responsible for conducting the poll. Financing polls by financial institutions is not illegal. However, in an interview with Fulha, Sergio Train, a political science PhD and professor of political communication, noted that the disclosure of results could be a strategy to gather votes for a favored candidate of a particular company. He also mentioned that one of the interests behind these payments is to assess the viability of supporting specific candidates. While these reasons might make sense, they are at least dubious when it comes to the true motivation behind an electoral poll. This becomes even more relevant for companies within the financial market. What do they expect politicians to do for them in return? This raises numerous political and economic questions that can arise during or even after an election. However, the reality is that the actual purpose of an electoral poll might lie in its ability to persuade a portion of the population. Let's imagine the following scenario. It's the beginning of the election period for a presidential vote, and the population is still evaluating the candidates and undecided about whom to vote for. Then, a poll emerges showing one candidate significantly ahead of the others. At this point, someone who's undecided might think about voting for the candidate already leading, since no one wants to waste their vote. It seems better to join the winning team. However, that team wasn't really winning, and it's solely because of the poll that they managed to sway votes from people who were still in the decision-making phase. This scenario demonstrates the true power of an electoral poll. It wouldn't be an issue if polls assisted people in deciding between different candidates. The problem arises when the poll doesn't accurately reflect the true voting intention. Unfortunately, this is quite common due to one simple factor: sampling. As mentioned earlier, sampling involves selecting a representative and diverse group of voters, aiming to reflect the population of the state or municipality where the poll will take place. Certainly, the research institutes responsible for conducting polls might strive to carry out this sampling in the best way possible. However, Brazil is a vast country, and no company will travel across the entire national territory to gather a diverse sample from all Brazilian states and their regions. As a result, the sampling might be varied, but not to the extent of representing the immense diversity of all Brazilians. This, in turn, can lead to biased polls favoring certain viewpoints. Looking at the same list of 10 polls conducted by UNTOLD, the sample size varied from 2,000 to 5,744 interviewees, a minuscule number compared to the over 118 million valid votes in the first round of the 2022 elections. This corresponds to less than 0.005% of the voters. It's important to note that we're not claiming that electoral polls are false or hold no value. The point we want to emphasize is that the current method of conducting electoral polls has flaws that can lead to errors, such as those that occurred in the 2022 elections, where some institutes were off by 14 percentage points and even predicted a first-round victory. The main point is that the current sampling might not be sufficient to accurately depict the reality of Brazil. Perhaps polls could be more accurate if they were conducted on a regional or even municipal basis, especially in major urban centers like Sao Paulo, with a population of over 12 million inhabitants. The aim is to highlight that electoral polls are not as precise as they should be and should be analyzed merely as estimates, which may or may not be correct. They certainly shouldn't guide voting decisions or influence voters to support specific candidates. The key point is that electoral polls can provide a general direction, but a candidate should be judged not by the percentage of votes they might receive, but rather by their proposals and what beneficial changes they aim to bring to the population during their term. But what about you? What's your take on electoral polls? Have you changed your vote due to them? Or do you not really care about the presented numbers and choose your candidate through other means and for different reasons? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm eager to know your response. Thank you very much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up to support the channel. Also, make sure to check out your subscription and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay updated with all the latest content on our channel. A warm hug, and see you in the next video.